Good afternoon. I'm here with Freda Tepfer, a fellow Erie resident who actively participates in our local government process and I believe is the best candidate for Erie County Council District 3. Born and raised in New York, Freda completed her undergraduate studies in agricultural science at Cornell. She worked for the U.S. Forest Service in Washington State for over a decade. In 1991, Freda campaigned and successfully gained election to serve as an Arlington, Washington City Council member. As an elected official, she said that this experience taught her a great deal about the process of government from the other side of the table. From 91 to 2001, she also worked with county government as an environmental specialist and in land use, as well as a senior planner for hazardous waste management. Freda then moved on to a new career field where she acquired a master's degree from Western Washington University, and with an additional certification, she began working with people with visual impairments to develop and implement methods to expand their travel independence. That work eventually brought her to Erie in 2011, and she's been an avid citizen participant in local government ever since. She's especially proud to say that she's been a union member in nearly all of her employment since 1980. Welcome, Freda. It's great to share this conversation with you.
Oh, thanks, Danielle, and thanks for going through that history for me. I know it's a little bit challenging for people.
Freda, I'd love for you to tell us about some of your most meaningful accomplishments in your environmental work. I understand that you developed watershed restoration programs and helped businesses improve hazardous waste management. Please tell us more about how you influenced these outcomes.
So when I went to work for the Forest Service, it was like landing on the moon. It was a new world. And very early on, I learned about the needs of fish habitat related to water, soil and water, how they intertwine, and because that was the key to what my work was about. And then I also learned, I met at that very early training someone who was doing watershed restoration work. He was on a forest in Oregon, and I made him my mentor. And then I also was told, go out and monitor finished timber sales. I quickly learned that things didn't always happen the way people planned them to, because sometimes things were never physically possible in the first place. We didn't stop to ask. Or there were all these points along the way of that the information had to be passed along, and that didn't always happen. So that's why things didn't work. And I had to actually learn all those different people's jobs. So between that knowledge and working with my mentor in watershed restoration, I learned about techniques and I learned about funding mechanisms. It took me quite a while, but I got access to a funding source from timber sale funds to restore watersheds. And also I developed a process, and I included the other people in my office, the wildlife biologists, the fisheries biologists, so that they had a way to get into the process as well. And then in county government, again, like being on the moon, I had to learn all about hazardous waste management, what mattered to businesses, what would motivate a business to improve their practices. It would actually save them money. It would protect their workers and their property. And I learned a lot of this from my mentors in King County, the people who I apprenticed myself to. And it took several years, but I put together a workshop for sewer treatment plant operators. We had 50 of them come from almost Canada to almost where Mount St. Helens is. And we met with businesses and regulators, and people had a chance to exchange some really valuable information. Those are projects I had to really get myself in the door that wasn't always open. And because of that, I say, if you don't want something done, don't ask Freda to do it, because I'm going to get it done.
From what I'm understanding, you tend to identify an obstacle that's worth tackling. Then you use the whole of your creative capacity to identify possible answers toward a resolution. I've heard of that referred to as the Freda nudge. What are some of the tasks you've taken on since you've been here in Erie?
So since I retired, I've become an ambassador without a portfolio. I don't have a job and I'm not elected to anything, but I've established a really good rapport with people in the city about my credibility related to construction practices, access for disability people, people with disabilities. And as a result, the city has developed a handout to give to businesses to tell them how they need to manage their sidewalk access. On Green Garden, after a year and a half, Erie Forge has put in a new piece of sidewalk that they destroyed in their construction. And it's because I kept after the city, and finally those of us who walk up and down Green Garden have a nice piece of sidewalk. Also, you may have read about the city working on regulations of the LED reader boards. Well, that is another thing that I got going. Through former council member Mirsky, the city planning commission worked with to develop new regulations. And Mill Creek has had them for years. It's not anything amazing, it's just something that needed to be addressed. I also worked with a group of people who, after 5 years, we were finally able to get the city to pass the alternative lawn. Ordinance is a piece of the property maintenance code that allows people to grow native plants, to protect biodiversity, and to help manage stormwater better. I just helped push it through the final 2 years because it was just floundering. So the Freda nudge was coined by a friend of mine who said, because I let him know about things and I helped keep him informed, there's things that are so compelling to him that he feels like he has to get involved. So he called it the Freda nudge.
I keep coming back in my mind to that quote you mentioned earlier, if you don't want something done, then don't ask Freda to do the job. It's that very characteristic that compels me to notice what you do. I like the way you look at problems from a wider perspective. I like the way you persist in bringing new information and new ideas until a solution's within reach. What pushes you to look beyond the status quo toward a potential that's invisible to others?
I think the fact that I've had a variety of experiences, I've lived in various locations, and I constantly informally apprentice myself to new people, it really helps me to widen my perspective. And I don't just stop when people say no. If somebody says we don't do that, and it's something I think needs to get done, I look to see if it's happening somewhere else and how they're doing it and how they overcame the problems and stuff. So I think it's a great way to look at the world, to possibilities, and to work with the people who I'm trying to get to do something different so that they can feel like it was something they wanted to do, not that somebody made them do it.
I've heard the term deliverables, and I feel it could neatly sum up your dynamic in that it's the goal that you ultimately seek. What are deliverables, and how does producing deliverables illustrate your process? So
deliverable is the thing that you say you're going to do, and that's important at the county level with a lot of funding programs. So I'm particularly excited about the possibility with working with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the development of 5-year transportation plans. And a lot of times deliverables are just about traffic. You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But you can also widen that field to address pedestrian problems, to include bicycle paths. And it's a creative opportunity. How you write those deliverables can impact your ability to generate additional funding, to bring in more partners, and even it affects staffing. So I think it's really important to widen your vision on what can be done.
What do you see as the biggest issue that consistently concerns many Erie voters, it comes up. What do you feel that is, and what would you like to do about that issue?
So as I'm canvassing, I've heard people talk about taxes. People say, yeah, well, that's good, but I don't want it to raise my taxes. So again, how we frame a program, how we cooperate with other people, how we build our partnerships is a way to get things done without raising taxes all the time, or to help people understand what is it's a concept called your enlightened self-interest. Mm-hmm. Why is this thing so important to me that I'm willing to help pay for it? So I think how we communicate, how open county government is, how inclusive and involved it is, I think is a way to help people want to support programs, but especially through cooperation and alternative funding.
What wakes you up every day and plants your feet firmly on the ground in pursuing this county seat? What kind of Erie do you envision, and what kind of change do you want to affect in Erie County?
It's Thursday. It's the day I do my Meals on Wheels route, so I'm really aware of all the different challenges that affect people in our community. Because I drive from Lecom to downtown, and I drive all over downtown. Erie is all hands on deck. Erie County, Erie City, we all need to be involved. And the contribution of all the residents is needed for success. As I've said, we need to have an open, inclusive government. We need something that welcomes people's participation, that isn't keeping appointments and involvements to the few and inner core. And we need to always welcome and expand the cooperation with the outlying jurisdictions and all the different organizations and business entities. And again, resilience. How we are a community that responds to the challenges facing us environmentally.
In closing, Freda, I want to thank you. You've given us a great deal to think about. Thank you for sharing your time, your energy, and thank you for your effort in making the Erie community a better place to call home. Are there any closing words you'd like to share with us?
I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be here today. I've had a lot of good conversations with people as I canvass around the district, and I'm welcoming your support, and I hope that you will vote for me on May 21st in the primary. Thank you.